Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm Jim West, founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com, and we have a very, very distinguished guest with us today. This gentleman is where I'm going to start with him. He's got titles like Master Inventor, Cybersecurity Architect, Distinguished Engineer. He's also an author. He's a YouTuber. He's got a YouTube channel which we're going to have in the description below, so you don't have to search for it. Don't go too far. It's right there with great clips. He's got short format videos with just packed full of content to longer videos where he goes really into depth and gets you a lot of great information. I love how he uses the light board in all his videos. So again, great content. And without further ado, we have Dr. Jeff Crume, and it's not Crum. So if you see his name on the
No, it's
internet,
not.
it's like Crume. So
That's
Jeff,
right.
welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm super excited for this discussion we're about to have. But tell the people watching a little bit about yourself. Even though I gave you a
Yeah.
little bit of an introduction, but there's so much more that 42 years covers.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jim. I appreciate the invitation to do this. And I'll just say, even some of the things you said were true about me. So we'll take a look at what those are. Yeah. So I wear kind of two hats. My day job is where I've been, like you said, at IBM for 42 years. And for those who are wondering, yes, I did go straight from the neonatal unit right into the job because
Mhm.
I wouldn't otherwise be as old as the math would indicate.
Yeah.
So I've been with IBM for all that time. And the last about 5 years, I've also been an adjunct professor at NC State University,
I
which is
love it.
my alma mater. Yeah. I got my computer science degree there back in the age of the dinosaurs. And now I'm back. Oh, there we go. There we go. Yes. I remember the stuff before
And
then, the
even
punch
the
cards.
bigger record size ones, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Even the punch cards before that. So yeah, that's what I started on. Cut my teeth on those things. So yes, been at it for a little while, and it's a great bit of fun for me to be able to go back to the same place where I learned and be able to kind of pay it forward and give back that way. But like you said, the other stuff I do, I work in a technical sales role at IBM where I'm involved as a security architect, working with clients anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, so anywhere North and South America. And I could end up in any one of those places and have had an opportunity over the course of my career to travel to more than 50 countries on
Nice.
business. So that to me is just one of those priceless things you get on the side. Lived in Beijing in 2006, so that was a learning experience as well. And then, like you said, the latest adventure is after doing the book 25 years ago. Now the latest thing is YouTube.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm doing and going out to our studio at Research Triangle Park. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina,
Mhm.
and we have a studio out there, IBM does, where I record videos just about every Friday morning, and that has been just a blast.
Wow. And I love that you're now, shifting over into a medium like YouTube because again, I love the educator in you. When you mentioned you're a
Yeah.
professor and you're just providing all this knowledge and wisdom and insight to just the internet, to the world. I love that. So as one of the things that attracted me to your profile and it's like, I got to get this guy on the podcast.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
I do want to kind of talk about those works, even though they might have been a little while ago, but they still had some
Yeah.
impact in industry. There's two books that I was looking at, and the one title was really catchy to me. It
Yeah.
was The Inside Information Security: What Hackers Don't Want You to Know. So
Yeah.
that particular work, what a title. It's a mouthful of a title, but it's definitely eye-catching. So if
Yeah.
I don't want you to go into the whole thing of the book,
Yeah.
but if there was one big takeaway, like the big message that people could take from that book, and of course the link to that book, you
Yeah.
guys, is in the description below. So
Yeah.
again, don't worry about Googling it. I'm saving you the
Yeah.
Google search.
There you
But
go.
Jeff, what would be the big takeaway from
So
that
I got to
book?
give away the spoiler? Do we need to say
Oh,
spoiler
okay. Well,
alert or
maybe
anything? No,
give
no,
this
no,
the
no, no,
tease
no.
of
I'm
it,
kidding.
but
I'm kidding. It's not that kind of book. No, no. Yeah, I wrote that. That was 25 years ago, and most people would think, gosh, a technology book that old, there can't be anything still true about it. That would be like, reading ancient manuscripts in our world of web years, but what I tried to do with that book is I tried to identify what I thought were the major things, the themes, recurring themes. Now, this was 25 years ago that were causing security systems to be breached. And on the good news part of the book, even though some of the technology examples will certainly look dated, when I'm talking about 8286 processor or something
Yeah.
like that. Okay. Yeah, that's like, okay, boomer, that's nice. We haven't used those in 1,000 years, um, but overall, techniques, the issues that were involved with it, I would probably explain them differently now, given I have more 25 more years of experience
Mhm.
and things like that I would call out. But it turns out almost all of it's still true.
Yeah.
Now, that's good for the publisher that probably 80% of the book, 25 years old, is still vital and relevant. The problem for us as an industry is 85%, 80% of that is still true. In other words, haven't learned. We're still
Yeah.
making the same mistakes we were making 25 years ago.
The late
So there's
Kevin
that.
Mitnick. Yeah, so not to interrupt you,
Yes.
the late Kevin Mitnick, who was kind of like the godfather of the hackers, the first poster child
Yeah,
for hackers. He started off with the whole social engineering, slash
that's right.
phishing, if you will, but mainly social engineering was his bread and butter,
That's
and uh,
right.
and that was tactics from again decades ago, and it's
Yeah.
still we as we saw in the MGM hacks, we're using the LinkedIn profiles of the sysadmins and
Oh,
using
yeah.
social engineering and compromise a major corporation as MGM casinos in Vegas. It's still
Hmm.
relevant today. Like you said, all
Oh, it
those
is.
techniques and tactics, they're still used and they still work. So again, if it
Still
still
is.
works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it from the hacker
Absolutely.
perspective.
Yeah, you touched on two interesting things to me that I have firsthand experience with. So I'll do the second one first, and that was you mentioned the MGM hack. IBM was having a conference out, and by the way, I should say, even though I work for IBM, all of my thoughts that I say here, everything I say, the disclaimer, these thoughts are my own. I'm not representing IBM in these moments. So there we go. Now the lawyers are off our backs. Um, but IBM was having a big conference at the MGM hotel at the time that that thing occurred. And so I almost didn't get checked into the hotel because all their systems were down. It took forever. There were lines. And some of my colleagues got checked in, but their room keys wouldn't work. It was about 3 weeks after I checked out before I finally got a bill. They couldn't even provide one,
Wow.
at the moment of checkout. Now, just imagine, so anyway, I got to live that one firsthand, not as a security person, but just as an
Yeah.
end user of the system. The other thing you mentioned about Kevin Mitnick, I actually met him many years ago. He
Right.
has passed away, unfortunately,
Yes. I'm too
fairly
soon.
recently, but I met him. He and I were both guest speakers at an event. There were three speakers, and we were two of the three. We had dinner the night before, and so I'm going to tell you, if you don't know, when Kevin was arrested, he was arrested in Raleigh, which is where I live. And I didn't know him at the time. I wasn't even in the security space at that point. But anyway, he was the world's most wanted hacker
Hmm.
for quite some time, and then they just find him in an apartment in Raleigh, the low Raleigh. So anyway, that's background. Well, anyway, many years later, after he is out of jail, and he's now we're both speaking at this conference. After dinner, I went up to him. I said, "Hey, Kevin, where do you live these days?" And he said, "Well, I live in Henderson, Nevada, which is outside of Las Vegas." And I said, "Yeah, I know where it is." And he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Raleigh." And then I just let it sit there.
Hmm.
And I said, after about 2 or 3 seconds of pregnant pause, I said, "Ever been there?" And he said, "Oh, yes."
Ah, nice.
Big eye roll. So anyway, I had that moment of connection with him.
You mentioned your book being, 25 years old and, maybe 80% of it is applicable, which is sad and from a
Yeah, right.
defensive purpose, good for the attackers, but not good for us. But even at 20%, there's a couple of things in that I recently published a book called The Art of War in Cybersecurity, where I look at Sun
Mm.
Tzu's The Art of War and try to
Oh,
apply
yeah.
it to the modern day cybersecurity landscape.
Uh-huh.
And I think there's value in all this wisdom and insight. You just
Good
got to find
point.
a way for either the correlation to work or where those strategies are still used today. I think there's certain tactics and techniques that apply to like a battlefield in real life as well as a cyber
Mhm.
battlefield, and I think it's very similar in that aspect. I do want to also
Absolutely
talk.
true. I still refer to Sun Tzu in my class at
Oh
the
yeah.
at NC State University, and all of my students look at me like I've got three heads. They have no idea why I'm bringing this up, but to me, that's part of the classic cybersecurity lore that we're obliged to pass on to the next generation because there are some of those classic lessons that we have to keep learning. They say that there's, I think it was Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
But it rhymes. Of course, the quote from Fallout, for any fans of the video game series Fallout, is "War never changes."
Ah, there you go. Yes,
42
right.
years at IBM, a super packed career. I'm sure you have 1,001 stories that we could share, but I know we don't have
Mm.
enough time on this podcast to go through some of them. But when you look back at 42 years, and still counting, so let's not,
That's
so
right.
sunset here in the immediate future. But because I
Haven't
think
checked if my badge worked today, but yeah,
your
so
badge
far.
still works. So, but across 42 years, and this is why I want to talk about it. I'm not trying to hammer like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
you're ready for pasture. By no
Yeah,
means. We
right.
need you in
Uh-huh.
cyber
Yeah,
as long as you're willing to give your time and energy to
absolutely.
cyber. But what I wanted to talk about in that decades of time, I kind of raised these up while you were speaking earlier, right?
Yeah.
You've seen the transition of technology during a time where, what was the famous quote by Bill Gates? All we need is 100 kilobits or
Yeah, right, right,
we
right.
went from things like 1.44, and then of course zip
Uh-huh.
drives and other drives to
Yes.
USB drives to now they're super small with lots of terabytes,
Yeah.
gigabytes. Things have changed drastically. And now we're at the precipice of quantum computing, right? And that's about to become the big thing because Google Willow AI has already put out their press release on their chip. Microsoft last week put out their big, press information on there. IBM's
Hmm.
pretty soon, I'm sure, in any month now, going to drop
Oh,
some
we're
news
doing stuff
because
all the time on it. Yes.
I believe what's we're seeing is a lot of information being shared. Which we want some transparency. We want to know what the big
Hmm.
folks are doing with quantum.
Yeah.
But what I believe this is also going to cause is kind of what I think is going to be a quantum chip race, not only in number of qubits, because even though that's an important factor of the exponential
Hmm.
processing power and compute, but obviously error correction has become a big deal, right?
That's a
When
big
Google
part. Yeah.
AI announced their error correction, Microsoft announced their approach to error correction, and I'm sure
Hmm.
everybody's going to have an approach or very similar or related or parallel type of
Absolutely.
this. But I got ahead of myself with quantum there. But back to
Yeah.
this, 4 decades plus of a career, you've seen significant changes and shifts in technology. At one point, and again, IBM at one point, is when it came to like databases and like the command line type interfaces, early software was like so dominant in the field. And then all of a
Oh,
sudden,
yeah.
this small upstart called Microsoft from
Hmm.
version, at least from what I remember, 3.0, then 3.11, the networking version, and then NT. It just became the juggernaut of operating systems, right? And so, oh
Here's my
goodness,
still in the shrink wrap, Microsoft Windows.
oh my goodness,
Yeah, this is 3.0. So,
3.0.
yes, still in
My
the shrink wrap. So,
my
yes.
goodness. I wonder how much that would get on eBay or at
I know. I do wonder
a
that.
private
Yes.
collector. Probably get a
But
pretty penny.
I'll
But
continue to hang
you've
on to
seen
it for at
this.
least the time being. And while we're going down memory lane, so here was my first computer. This is a Sinclair Z80. This is the Z81 model. Had 2K of RAM. Not meg, K.
Yeah.
2K of RAM. This was it. So
But I mean, at
here we
that
go.
time, it was mind blowing, right?
It
Like,
was
hey,
mind blowing. I couldn't believe that you could actually have a thing that you could touch keys and then it did stuff and you hook
yeah,
it up to a TV screen. And if you wanted to save anything, you had to I think it had a cassette interface. Yeah. Yeah. So it had an ear output and microphone input. And that's what it used to write out to cassette
the
tape.
cassette, and that
So
was still,
yeah,
a tape medium, still
that's
using
right.
cassettes, right? You're using
Absolutely.
magnetic fields, if you will.
That's right.
What's interesting is it reminds me of the scene, of course, the beloved franchise, Back to the Future, Michael J. Fox,
Yeah.
where he goes back to when his parents were young
Yeah,
teenagers,
right.
and that scene
Right.
of him in the radiation suit and the headphones, and he's using
Hmm.
his technology, but back then, and to them, it was mind blowing, right?
Yes,
So with
exactly.
that being said, if today you could go back and talk to yourself that was using that device you just showed us and said, hey,
Hmm.
eventually there is a point in time where we're going to have, you could talk to a machine, it will
Yeah.
interpret everything you're saying and do all these
Yeah.
different tasks, referring to
Yeah.
AI. What do you think
Yeah.
that self back then would have been like? Mind blown or been like, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I would have slapped me for saying such a thing. I would be like, come on, let's get real. I mean, yes, I would. I wanted to believe it was true. When I was an undergrad, I took a course in artificial intelligence because I thought that is just going to be the coolest thing ever. And I remember in the course, they basically said, this technology is really like 5 to 10 years away. Well, that was in 83. So yeah, add let's say 10 years, 1993. I don't think most people felt we were really doing AI yet.
No.
And so around about that time, I took a continuing education course through IBM's internal offering on AI. And I got really engaged in the topic again. And again, they kind of said, well, it's about 5 to 10 years out.
Yeah.
And it just felt like to me, AI is always going to be 5 to 10 years
10 years.
away. The closer we get to the finish line keeps moving, you
Uh,
know. But now with the era of the chatbots and large language models and things like that, all of a sudden overnight, it's still not, it's not sentient. It's not all the kind of sci-fi things that have envisioned here, but it feels like AI is real now. And now I don't feel like it's 5 to 10 years away. I feel like I have been around long enough to see what was a pipe dream become an actual reality. I can type messages into a system in natural language and it understands me.
yeah.
That is no small feat.
Mhm.
And IBM's done some groundbreaking work. This is not me being a shill for the company. It's just recalling the walk down memory lane in the AI space. I can remember in 1997, IBM built a computer. I was involved in it called Deep Blue that played against Gary Kasparov,
Yes.
the best chess player in the world. And pretty much everybody said before that point, okay, you can make a computer that could win at chess against a good chess player, maybe even a very good chess player, but not a grandmaster. Those guys are otherworldly
Yes.
genius. They think, 10 moves ahead. They have strategies,
Or they think the whole
creative
game.
thoughts that you'll never be able to
Yeah.
simulate. Oh, oops. Kasparov got beat, and that was 1997.
Hmm.
So that was but even though that accomplishment happened, everybody didn't declare, yes, AI is here. We still, continued going, well, okay, you can win at chess, but how about something else?
Hmm.
Well, then I think it was 2011 when IBM built a different AI system called Watson that took on the Jeopardy challenge.
Hmm.
And we on 3 consecutive nights on national live TV at corporate headquarters had Ken Jennings and I forgot the other guy's name, but two of the all-time Jeopardy champions go against a Watson system. Now, let me tell you, if you wanted to imagine a room full of nervous executives, that was the place to be because they're on national TV and we either sink or fall in
Yeah.
front of everyone. And let me tell you, if Watson had not won, the headlines would not have been nice try. It would have been, IBM, is IBM sucks,
Yeah, it's a
AI
joke.
is not
Yeah.
here. It's all a pipe dream,
Reputation.
all that kind of.
Dang.
Well, thankfully we won every 3 nights in a row. And again, I think it's fascinating to think about how long it took to get 1997 to 2011 to be able to win at chess versus winning at Jeopardy. In general, I mean, those are real smart people on both of those things. But if you were to think who is the bigger genius, the best chess player in the world or the best Jeopardy player in the world, I think most people would say probably the chess player.
Yeah.
But
The
but
combinations, the probabilities of the moves from the
exactly,
many moves. Yeah.
you know, a lot of people can know trivia, but it turns out that Jeopardy was a much harder problem to solve from a computing standpoint because the subject matter was so broad.
Hmm.
Because in chess, we have a bounded game with very specific rules. You can only stay on the board. You can't go off the board. You can't invent new things. So, because it was bounded, you can build constraints much more easily. A game like Jeopardy uses idioms, figures of speech.
Yeah.
If you
Jargon. Yeah.
say, it's raining cats and dogs outside, they're not small animals falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would give a
But how
different
would
meaning to the song "It's Raining Men."
Exactly. Yes, it would. Very different context. So, but how do you have to go into every single one of those idioms and program them in? No. Well, we have a system now that's able to understand those kind of things. Lots of people do. So I look at those kind of things and I think it's remarkable. We've still got a long way to go,
Yeah.
but this is it's an amazing time to be alive and watching these kind of developments happen.
What are your thoughts and opinions of, we got a lot of different other what I call titans in industry. Mo Godot is no stranger to having some slightly controversial statements, him substantiating statements as a former Google exec of AI approaching, I think one statement has attributed him as having a 155 IQ. Again, I know
Hmm.
there's multiple IQ tests and scales to
Yeah,
be
there
measured
are.
at, but
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on when there's statements made that it's approaching Einstein level? So Einstein's generally attributed of 160 to 190 IQ, depending on what
Hmm.
source you look at.
Yeah.
But what we call consider genius level IQ to within, I think they're projecting 5 to 8 years, which that 5 to 10 year
Uh-huh.
mark, everybody likes to
Kudos.
use that,
Right.
of having 1,000 plus IQ, which is beyond the smartest. I think the smartest person on the planet is like 240, 230 something.
Yeah.
So surpassing the smartest people on our planet per the,
Yeah.
the IQ tests that they're out there. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is a potential future reality where we'll have AI systems that have some sort of measurable IQ beyond the smartest people on our planet
I hope
before
if our
sentient?
AI, yeah, I hope if our AI future overlords are watching this now, they hear me saying I'm very much a fan. Um, No, I don't think anybody knows. I think there is a mass amount of speculation. There are certain things that are foreseeable. There's a lot of things that aren't. I remember a numerical methods course I took in college, again, back in the days of the dinosaurs. And there was this idea of interpolation. You can get multiple data points and you can draw a curve or a line that connects those things. Even though you don't have every single data point, you can kind of guess if it went here, then here, then here, then this is probably the curve that describes that.
Mhm.
But that's interpolation. Extrapolation is where's the next data point? Well, it's been going like this, but there's no guarantee that the next one is here. The next one could be down here
Yes.
because something might change. And so that's what I'm saying. Extrapolation, which is what future telling, is always going to be a dangerous prediction game.
Mostly
That
speculation. Yeah.
that that said, I look at our current state of AI as we've got artificial intelligence. What we don't have is artificial general intelligence. That
Yeah.
is a system that is able to do everything better than a person.
Hmm.
We've got systems that are able to do certain things better than people, but then everything else they're terrible at.
Yes.
It's a little bit like I'll refer to them as siloed savants. A savant, if you think back to the movie Rain Man, the Dustin Hoffman character is a savant. Now, they made him an amalgamation of multiple savants. Most savants don't have multiple skills like he did,
Yeah.
but he could count cards, right? Just like a machine. Never forget, that would be a skill. He could remember everything that ever happened on any particular day that he had been alive.
Photorealistic memory. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you could tell him a future date and he could tell you what day of the week it was going to
Yes.
be.
Even a
That sort of thing.
calculator. Yeah.
Again, these are all actually different skills, and there's not likely to be a savant that can do all of these different kinds of things. But that's what our AI to me is like. We've got AIs that can do this, we got AIs that can do that and that and that, but they're very siloed. Artificial and general intelligence would be matching or exceeding human intelligence across all of these
Yes.
domains. And that one is still further out.
Yeah.
And then artificial super intelligence would be the next level beyond that. That I'm not sure when we ever get to that. Who knows? I'm never going to bet against the future because it's got infinite time,
Mhm.
and I don't.
Yes.
So the predictions that it's the end. One thing that all of those have had in common, the prophets of doom. One thing they all have in common, they've all been wrong
They've all been
because
wrong.
we're still here. So
I was
I won't
raised in
predict that.
central. I was raised in foster care in central Louisiana, in a really small town with like dirt gravel roads, and we had like a
Oh yeah,
small Pentecostal church cemetery. Everybody that knew everybody was buried there, kind of church.
yeah,
We would have revivals and these visiting pastors,
yes,
and they would always
yes,
preach about the rapture, right? So I'm
yes.
proud to say I survived 7 raptures,
There
and
you go. There
but
you go.
that's the thing with time, right?
Congratulations.
Time's the ultimate judge of these things.
That's
One of the
right.
things I want to talk about, you mentioned about the AGI, the general intelligence,
Uh-huh.
and of course the super intelligence that's on that pathway. A lot
Yeah.
of people fear AI, like, oh, AI is going to take all our jobs; they're going to become our overlords and so
Yeah.
forth. I'm just gonna let people know now, for all the people that invested heavily in billions and billions of dollars into AI development and R&D and et cetera, just remember James Cameron put out a whole film franchise warning us all about the dangers of AI in
Hmm.
Terminator
Yes.
franchise. But
Yes. Yes.
um, This side of the doomsday, folks. Like it's going to cause, the whole
That's
collapse
right.
of society, the financial systems. We talk
Yeah.
just the Q-day thing that's running rampant.
Oh
That I
yeah.
believe to a degree, like Zero Day just came out on Netflix. I had a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
pick
I'm
with a lot
watching
of the
that
different
now.
episodes, but I don't want to go into
Yeah.
that series. But back to the question I asked earlier. You have seen technology go from the big record, the tape medium, punch cards. You've seen
Hmm.
these emerging technology again and again, wave after wave come and disrupt different sectors of the industry, improve things. Things got faster, smaller, bigger, better, etc.
Hmm.
Before AI, like if you was to say, what was two or three like emerging tech moments that technology disruptive moments that you would look back and say, you know what? Before AI, and of course, quantum's going to disrupt us, but this was a big moment when we went from here to
Yeah.
here and then here to
Sure.
here.
Those inflection point moments, yeah, absolutely. And we may even come back and have a discussion about the is AI taking jobs or making jobs. I did a video on that subject, and I'll tell you the short answer to that is a definite yes. It's doing both,
Yeah.
and it will continue to do it. But we can come back to that if you're interested.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so I look at the arc of computing that I've seen, during my time. Like I said, when I started off, it was punch cards. Everything was on mainframes. That's where I did my first work at IBM was on mainframes. And just about the time I was starting was also when the first PCs came out. Now, I had this little guy when I was in college. So the notion of personal computing existed, but it wasn't mass market. You couldn't just go, this was a hobbyist machine. You had to be, one of the lunatic fringe to own one of these kinds of
Yeah.
things, right? But you didn't just go to a computer store because they didn't exist, an electronics store and buy these on the mass market. So IBM coming out with the first PC, Apple certainly had Macintosh and some other kinds of computers like that, but that was the first one that really made this thing a business machine. That then, okay, if people are going to really invest a lot of money in this, then there's going to be a lot of improvements in it, and that's where we saw a sudden, spike in what could be possible. So, but I look at this through the eyes of a security guy. We went from the data center where all the data was housed in a fixed location over private network connections that were really slow. There was no internet.
Serial
Um,
bus. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it was a lot of security in those days was what we call the guards, guns, and gates. It was about, you control access to the physical terminal, and that's your security. Well, then the PCs came along, and suddenly the data center could sit on someone's desk. Well, the security department broke out in hives when they came into contact with that. You mean there's no security camera? There's no badge on this thing? What if somebody just carries that thing out? Well, it got better slash worse for those folks because then it turned into laptops. And then the data center grew legs and could just walk away. Then we got mobile computing and everybody started getting one of these kind of devices. Now the data center will fit in your pocket. And the data center could have fallen out of your pocket in a taxi or an Uber now, and now it's riding around the streets of New York. I mean, just imagine a few years ago, the data center riding around the streets of New York, and we don't know where it is.
Yeah.
But this is not just the data that's on it, which is substantial. This is also a risk in terms of this is a portal into multiple clouds. So that's that next era, cloud computing. I don't have to have all the data in one place. It's out there in the ether somewhere. And I can access all of those clouds, multiple clouds from one device. So this is like the portal into all of those things.
Yep.
And then along comes IoT, where everything becomes a computer. And as a security guy, I know every computer can be hacked. So therefore, everything can be hacked. That's the world we're moving to.
Yeah.
And then add that next one, and it's AI. And then the next one, and some of these are happening simultaneously, is quantum. So those are, to me, the eras of computing in terms of capability. And then the other major inflection point was when the internet essentially became popularized and people started having access to it. I remember my first access to the internet was fully through a command line interface. And I had to log in through two different proxies in order to get to it. And it was just a pain in the neck. You had to memorize everything. There was no bookmarks. There were no graphical browsers.
Yeah.
So again, to
Was
see
this
it now,
ArcNet?
what's that?
Was this ArcNet still?
It was just after that.
Okay.
Just after that. So it
Right.
was a public internet, but it was like somebody had put down a few dirt roads and nobody had cars yet.
Yeah.
So nobody was even using them to amount to anything. But those were the things that have been the game changers. And I do think the introduction of LLMs and chatbots of this sort is another one of those inflection points that we'll look back on in history and say, that's when AI became real. That's when it really took off. We've had machine learning for decades,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a big thing. It was kind of in the periphery. But now machine learning is whether people realize it or not, is being leveraged in all of those LLMs. So we're using it. We just don't use it directly. We use it through the form of the large language model.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think all that stuff is fascinating, and I think as you mentioned, quantum computing is going to be another fascinating piece, and that one is coming. You mentioned Q Day.
Hmm.
At some point, a quantum computer will be able to read all of our encrypted messages. And what a lot of people, I work with clients on this all the time, is trying to have them understand you can't wait until Q Day
Right.
when the quantum computers are strong enough to do that. Because their attitude is they're kind of thinking this more like a Y2K. Okay, if I know when the date is, I'll fix the systems just in
When
time
I
for
know.
that, right? No, no, you won't know. First of all, we won't know when Q Day happens.
Yeah, to be very
It,
transparent.
the people that actually are first able to do this are probably not going to talk about it. They're going to sit on the information they have and use it very judiciously. So that's the first bit. The second bit is that there's an attack scenario called harvest now, decrypt later. If I make a copy of your data, let's say I put a tap on your network and you're a good corporate citizen, cyber guy, you encrypt everything through a VPN, fine. I'll just store all the packets and I'll wait for the future to come to me. And one day I'll run them through a quantum computer and see if there was anything of interest. And if you're a nation state, that might be classified information that we intended to keep classified for 100 years
Hmm.
that suddenly will be in the public domain. So that will be destabilizing if people don't make sure that they put in the protections now. And the good news is we have quantum safe algorithms
Hmm.
today. I'm not involved in this, but I feel as a point of pride, it's nice. There were four finalist algorithms that the National Institute of Standards and Technology picked. Three of those four had IBM contributions in them, and
Hmm.
we hired a guy that worked on the fourth one.
Yeah.
So if I have quantum questions, I literally know a quantum physicist that I can go have lunch with out at Research Triangle Park,
Hmm.
and that is just to me so cool that
Yes, I mean
those people
the
exist,
number of
and I can just look them
mathematicians
up.
at the top of their game. I refer to it's a RuneScape reference called
Yeah.
Level 99. There was a lot of mathematicians and physicists involved in that. Of course, the poster child of cryptography, Brian Schneider, was involved
Oh
with
yeah.
several of those teams. I think more so just to raise their status in the cook-off,
Yeah.
if you will.
That's
But
right.
yeah. In regards to quantum, I actually deliver a presentation. I'm actually this year in 2025. I'm speaking at 12 events, and the topic
Ah.
that's most requested is it was formerly called the real threat of quantum computing. I delivered this since 2017 to about seven, eight
Hmm.
events a year, and now I'm at
Uh-huh.
12 events this year. But I had to rebrand it and update the data and information in it because an example was back in 2017, I did some math about what kind of a compute power it would take to defeat AES 256, and the
Oh
time
yeah.
I think the Tiani 2E 2A supercomputer in China was what I based my math off of. And it basically was like all of the material on the planet Earth and all the time that exists in the galaxy, it still couldn't defeat it given
Yeah.
that supercomputer. Well, now that quantum numbers are coming out, and this is something I'll caveat with a lot of folks, they'll hear the headlines of quantum, Google AI did a chip, their Willow chip did a 6 septillion years in 4 minutes. You have to
Hmm.
pay attention to the devil's in the details. So you have to look at what was the algorithm or the routine that they were running for it to
That's
crack. So
right.
yes, maybe that particular routine was not optimized. The supercomputers can't
Hmm.
be optimized for that algorithm or routine, but the Google Willow chip was, and therefore it could do that septillion years in 4 minutes. Same thing with
Yeah.
Microsoft. They had a claim about they was able to run some routine that would take so much time. So to kind of not to go down the road too much down
Yeah.
all that people need to know, the down and dirty is when it comes to cryptography, Jeff already mentioned about 400 years. How many years can that algorithm resist brute force? And so
Hmm.
the general rule of thumb in cryptography is every algorithm will give you a key space of some size. And the rule of thumb is if you could get it to a coin flip per the session, meaning if you could tear down half the key space, then that is usually treated as a threat to the security of
Hmm.
that algorithm. And so, on that the post-quantum cryptography list that NIST had published about a year, 2 years ago,
Hmm.
um, the AES still made the cut, and so AES
Yes.
256. Now, of course, there are measures to ramp up.
256, not 128. Yeah,
Yes, not 120,
the
256.
the basic evaluation of that is to say double your key size and your symmetric algorithms will be okay.
Yes,
But that's not true of asymmetric like RSA.
yes.
That's where the new quantum safe algorithms have to
So
come
those
in.
new algorithms like Kybers and so forth, those
Yes,
lithium, those are lattice-based models as
that's
far
right.
as the mathematical approach to generating the
Uh-huh.
keys and the numbers and the secrecy element. But when it comes to crypto, the point I want to make with a lot of folks, you can read about the different algorithms. There's plenty of documentation and YouTube channels that cover it. But the bottom line is that you have two factors. One is the time to resist a brute force attack. So you have time. Then we have a thing
Hmm.
called entropy. Another way of definition for it is randomness. The concept
Hmm.
here is a mathematical equation should produce a result of some kind, right? That's like 1 + 1 = 1. So we're talking about the level of mathematics and all these genius mathematicians coming together. They got to come up with something that can be reliable as an algorithm to produce keys that can be used for, unlocking and decrypting
Hmm.
and encryption. But at the same time, they have to have such a large pool and the randomness of how these numbers get pulled out of this pool, and that's the secret sauce, right? So one is the number of potential states. I'll use that term for right now.
Yeah.
It's to be exponentially gargantuan that it's
Yeah, the
no
key
use to
space.
try to compute it, brute force it. Then the
Hmm.
second part is the entropy and randomness. This goes from like key guessing and so forth. Because if you let's
Yeah,
say
the key
when it comes to
generation part of it. Because if you the hard thing is, look, we love computers because they're deterministic. If I had a computer and I said, "What's 1 + 1?" and it tells me 2, and then the next time it tells me it's 72,
not
well,
reliable.
then I wouldn't have any use for it.
Yeah.
So we want them to be deterministic. But here's the downside of determinism. It's not random. Okay. And we don't want it to be random until we do. And when I want to generate a key, I want it to be random. And I'm asking a system that does not, there's no, I mean, it can't be random. It has to do the same thing if you give it the same inputs. It'll give you the same outputs. So that's why we have the pseudo random number generators, not real random.
Mhm.
And that's why even if you had, as you're saying, you could have a perfectly strong algorithm, but if your key generation is predictable in any way,
Mhm.
then the whole thing falls.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it's
so
hard.
again, we don't want to go too much down the encryption rabbit hole, but yeah, for folks out there, remember, if you start reading about these things, the only thing that matters is entropy, the randomness of the algorithm, as well as time, how much time. So yes, the time part is why you're seeing Google, Microsoft, and IBM. They'll start talking about different algorithms and different routines they run and how much time it did it in. So that's a big thing that a lot of people can appreciate that works in cryptography. That's a danger, but you got to take in several factors of what is the routine it's running. So sometimes they may not publish that in their reports. Usually they'd want to because they want the scrutiny of the rest of the
Yeah.
physicists and mathematicians in the world. But at the end of the day, the ultimate thing that's going to protect AS256 is going to be Grover's iteration. And for anyone that
Mhm.
wants to, I'll put a link to it so you can read about the Grover's iteration. But it's the number one thing that's going for the AS256 as well as 512 if we double it up there.
Yeah.
That will protect AES-256. I redid the map based on Google's AI. I actually, with my conversations with a chatbot, I said, look, imagine we had a million qubit aligned system based on these facts and 100% error correction. And I fed all this and I crunched some numbers and I was like, yeah, it is still AES is still good. But again,
Mhm.
we don't know what the future is with the combination of a AGI or a super intelligent AI that may be able to
Mhm.
optimize and generate new approaches to defeating these algorithms. So
Mhm.
that's still a little disclaimer I'll make there,
Sure.
and I'll leave it there at that. Jeff,
Yeah,
and sorry I got long-winded on that because
that's all
that's
right.
a topic I'm super passionate about. But earlier we talked about it, and you mentioned if I wanted to talk about it, we can, and I do want to talk about it. So here's
Hmm.
this moment. A lot of people are immediately afraid that, okay, like I have a daughter that's going to school for business marketing, and I've already told her a year and a half ago, I said, AI is going to destroy your career field. Please study some cyber or some other
Hmm.
adjacent fields that you can lateral to.
Hmm.
But in response to that, you've seen again when I talked about the emerging technologies and the disruptions in industries, and at one time, like when people used to do factory work, we had a lot of people doing manual labor. Then the
Yeah,
robotics came in, the
that's
machinery
right.
came in. Everyone's like, oh, we're being replaced by robots. But then no, then that's new jobs created. We have to have people doing the maintenance on the robots,
Exactly right.
lubricating
In
them.
in the video that I did on this, in fact, you already covered part of it. I even start back a little further, and I talk about at the very beginning, when there was a time when on this planet, pretty much everyone had to work in the fields in order for us to feed ourselves.
Yep.
Our ability to do agriculture was very inefficient, required all hands on deck, or we starved.
Yes.
Well, with mechanized farming, then we didn't need everyone to work in the fields. It didn't mean everyone left the fields, but it meant not everyone has to be there. So we still needed farming jobs, but the nature of farming jobs changed. A farmer was not somebody who was, literally turning the soil with their hand. They were riding a tractor.
Mhm.
So I would say their quality of life and the kind of work they did was better, and they had a force multiplier that made it so that they could do
Force
more with
multiplier.
less.
Yep.
Okay, and it meant we didn't have people, just as many people, having to break their backs in fields. Okay, so that freed up that workforce. Was that the end of, okay, now there's the end of work. We only need, 10% of the world to feed, and everybody else doesn't have to work anymore. No, that's not what happened. What happened then was, as you said, we took that mechanization and we started creating factories. So now people move from the fields to the factories. And then we had automation in factories, so we didn't need as many people in factories. Did that mean that was the end of the workforce? No, it wasn't.
New
It then
businesses
freed
sprung
up
up.
people to do the kind of work that you and I do now. These white collar type of jobs, these information era type of jobs, where that became the thing. So AI is going to, I see that as the next turn of that crank. If you look at the historical evolution of these things, it's going to change some jobs. It's going to eliminate some jobs completely.
Hmm.
It's going to reduce the need for certain other positions, just as automation, just as mechanized farming has done. But it's an uplift for society, especially for the people who learn to adjust. Now, some of the things like I try to counsel my students, if you just love writing code all day long, bless you.
Yeah.
But we're going to have AI that's going to be able to do that too.
Yes.
Right now it's not as good as you are because you guys are really talented, but do not think you're going to have a 30-year career, all of you in this room, as programmers.
Or that
Some
the
of you,
salaries would be high because again, salaries and
exactly.
positions will shrink. Yes, absolutely
Exactly.
right.
So we're going to still need some people that do this, just like, in the early era of cars, you just about had to be a mechanic to drive one because they broke down so much. Well, now, thankfully, that's not the case. People don't need to know how a car works. They can just go get in one and drive it. But we still need mechanics because they still break down. So we still have to have some people who understand these things. It doesn't completely eliminate most of these, but it eliminates the need in many cases for that many people doing those kinds of things. And like you said, some of the creative work that people in the past said that only people can do that. Computers can't be creative. They can use a random, random number generator to simulate creativity. One of the first programs I ever wrote in high school was trying to have a computer write music, and I was using a random pseudo-random number generator, and it sounded awful. It sounded like random sounds, and I hadn't thought about the fact that none of this is going to sound any good because music doesn't go like this. There's a theme to it,
Hmm.
and but now we've got systems that are smarter than that, and they are creative. That's why we call them generative. They're generating new content. In some cases, some people have argued they're just regurgitating what already exists. I disagree. I give the analogy of, okay, all the musical notes have been invented. Does that mean that there's no more songs? That they're
Hmm.
all just regurgitations of
Of
the
each other.
musical? No, no. Same thing with the alphabet. Okay, we still got the same 26 letters, but people are writing new books every day by just organizing those in different ways. That
Yeah.
is a creative activity. So I think AI will continue to do that, and I think the smart move is for people to make AI a partner, especially as a brainstorming partner. You know, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I get to where, okay, what do I want to call this next video? Or if I want to do one on IoT security, what things should I consider? Okay, and I had 7 of the 10 that it listed, but the other three it listed that I
You didn't
knew
think
but
of.
hadn't thought of.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course I would do that. So it's nice to just have a brainstorming partner
Hmm.
to work with you on those things. But we still have a hallucination problem with generative AI.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to be the ones where I'm a big fan of human in the loop, HITL. We will start to make mistakes as we start taking humans out of the loop on this because right now the technology is not that mature yet. There's a big move towards agentic AI, using agents to take actions out of AI, and I think that's good. But when we're starting to talk about critical decisions, I'm not ready to hand that over to an agent yet because the system underneath it is still prone to hallucinations. Now, I'm working with a guy. We're going to put together a video soon about how to improve the accuracy of AI to
Hmm.
just talk about what some of the techniques are. So this will keep getting better. The people who say AI will never be able to, I would say stop before you even finish that
Yeah.
sentence because everyone that's said something like that in the past, most of them have been proven wrong. So
Yes.
I'm not about to say that AI won't be this, that, or the other thing. I'm also not about to say that we won't need to remake some of our definitions as we have over time. Alan Turing, back during the time of World War II, came out with what we now call the Turing test, which was going to be the test to prove whether a system was artificially intelligent or not. And it was basically if I sit here and type a message and I can't tell if I'm talking to another computer or to a human, then that means the computer has achieved intelligence because it's responding in the same way. Well, that test got passed years ago, even before LLMs. So now with LLMs, it very much feels like you're talking to another person.
Yes.
But what did we do? Did we say, yes, now AI has been achieved and it's no, then we just move the
Sentience.
bar.
Yeah.
Same thing with the deep blue and beating a chess grandmaster. When we accomplish that, then we just move the bar. So
Hmm.
we're going to keep moving the bar and we're going to keep changing our definitions of what is intelligence, what is not intelligence, what is sentience. I mean, I don't think there's a computer that's sentient now, but all of our definitions are based upon us,
Hmm.
which is a very egocentric way of looking at everything. And, you know, if we suddenly were visited by aliens, we'd have to remake some of our ideas about
Have
what
to
those
change
things are
a
like.
lot of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like if you were to go to another country. When I went to go live in China back in 2006, I had to remake a lot of ideas that I had about the world and about myself and about the way people think. So we're headed for a lot of culture shock
Yes.
coming down the pike in the term of technology.
Yeah. I wanted to add to, when you talked about the vehicles and when things shift and change, it does generate new industries and new career fields like mechanics, right? Oil change
Yeah.
shops. I mean, you can't drive 2 miles in a city each direction. I've seen several speedy lubes and other industries and things to make it more easier and convenient for us just to pull up, wait a few minutes, and keep on going about our lives because
Right.
we offload so many responsibilities. Like you said, it used to be you had to work on your own cars, change your own
Right.
oil. But even before that, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that talked about the different revolutions. And he talked about at one point you had horses and horse-drawn carriages. Now you don't see this anymore because now we have vehicles, and now we're going to go into
Hmm.
autonomous driving vehicles and so forth, and talk about all
Yeah.
these revolutions. Because now if we're not driving, that means our commute becomes either nap time, work on study
Hmm.
time, catch up on the news, talk video conference. I mean,
Hmm.
all these things cause these disruptions that are to make our
That's right.
lives easier. But I want to get back to a core concept because a lot of people debate this one, and I want your thoughts on it. The famous robotic laws, right? The
Oh
do
yeah.
not harm and so forth.
Asimov's. Uh-huh.
Asimov's laws, right? How do you think things like Asimov's laws, and then when I talk to other folks, like there's a few folks from MITRE that go around conferences that I've crossed paths with that talk about the debate within the industry and the different sectors trying to agree on the ethics and the
Mhm.
approaches to defining the boundaries or guardrails for these AI systems. And we're seeing what we've always seen. We've seen everybody wants to kind of do the thing that they do in their region or in their business sector, and we're not really having. I'm afraid we're not going to get that truly global collaboration that we really need from the get-go. But from your perspective, what do you think between Asimov's laws for robotics versus ethics? And then what I recently recommended to a couple folks at MITRE was using the philosophical razors like Occam's razor and
Mhm.
the Newton's flaming sword and so forth, into the
Mhm.
approach of how AI systems think and make decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think just as much as we have a lot of work on the technological side, we have a ton of work on the ethical and societal side of this that we haven't begun to scratch the surface of.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think about the Hippocratic Oath, the first do no harm. Okay, that's going to have to be something that maybe we don't only require physicians to swear an allegiance to that oath, but we're going to have to ask technologists to do the same kind of thing
Yeah.
and have better definitions as to what that means so that we're not doing harm, and try to understand what that means to not do harm. Another aspect of this is the legal aspect. And this will always be in conflict
Yeah.
because law by definition, Bruce Schneier wrote a great essay on this, and I start off my class that I teach, I call Secure Thinking. It's about issues in cybersecurity and privacy. And I start the semester with his essay that talks about comparing technology to policy, policy being law. And technology is inherently global, policy and law is inherently jurisdictional. If I come out with I write a new line of code and I release that into the world, it doesn't care what country it's running in. But every country's got their own rules.
Yes.
And those rules will never, not only are they different, but they're never going to be as fast. They're never going to keep up. We will always be able to generate new code faster than the law can keep up with and consider what the implications of it are. And by the way, I'm not dumping on lawyers when I say that, or lawmakers when I say that. We actually wouldn't want our legal system to be changing as quickly as our software
It could
does. Can you
stifle the
imagine?
technology advancement. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, can you imagine if overnight, oh yeah, my phone just updated to the new software level. Oh, overnight we just had a new law code drop down on us. I mean, that would be chaos if we
Yes.
were updating our law at the same pace that we're updating our software. So we wouldn't want that, but nevertheless, we do have to accelerate it. And we do have to inform lawmakers so that they make better decisions. They're
Yeah.
thinking in analogies that sometimes work and sometimes are outdated. And we've got to start thinking about this stuff in a very different sort of way. And there's a lot of stuff that we just have not nearly begun to wrestle with. And that's a lot of what I cover in the course that I teach is trying to get my students who are all computer science majors, all technically brilliant young men and women, but I want them to think, and I say this to them many times, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
I want you to realize you could write a program that would collect every piece of data about every person that ever lived. But should you? What would you do with the data? How might it be misused? Let's consider that there are unintended consequences to everything that you might naively put in place and not mean anything bad from.
Yes.
So I need them to be responsible citizens and realize that they're creating things that can be weaponized if they're not careful.
I love that. I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we can
Yeah.
talk again. I would love to have you back on the podcast, but I do want to
Yeah.
ask some non-technical questions if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
sure.
I do this with all my guests. So the
Hmm.
first question I'm going to ask, and these are just rapid fire questions. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's just for levity and for fun. So if you're ready,
Yeah.
I'm
All
going to
right.
start hitting you with them. First one is a hot dog a sandwich?
It is not.
It is not. Okay.
It is not. It is not. No, no. The bread has to be separated.
Have to be separate. Okay. Separation
Yeah.
of bread.
Yes.
Cake or pie?
Oh, cake. I'm not a communist.
Okay. What kind of cake?
Chocolate, of course.
You prefer hot or
I won't
cold?
accept any other answer than this.
Hot or cold chocolate cake?
Oh, hot.
Hot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
this was going to
Chocolate
split
cake
the room.
is, by the way, chocolate cake is my favorite vegetable. And don't tell me that it's not a vegetable because chocolate comes from a plant. So
Chocolate comes from a pet.
I'm done
Yep.
with that. Yeah.
All right. This was going to divide the room. So Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, Star Trek.
Oh,
Come on.
okay.
I'm going to tell you, I love sci-fi, but the first movie I ever fell asleep in was the original Star Wars movie.
Okay. New Hope. Okay.
Now,
Fair.
the second one I liked a lot better,
Who
but
was your favorite Star Trek character?
oh gosh, probably Spock.
Spock, Leonard Nimoy. Always a great.
Yeah, yeah.
What has been your most favorite book you've read of all time, and what was the last book you read?
Let's see. So many favorites, it's hard to say. I would say I'll throw you a curveball and say The Grapes of Wrath. I'm a huge
Ooh,
John Steinbeck fan.
Steinbeck. Okay.
Really like his stuff. Last book I read, oh gosh, I do so much reading online these days that it's rarely a complete book. Does an audiobook count if I listen to
Audiobook
it?
account? Yeah.
Okay, all right. Then the last one was The Revenge of the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. I just
Okay.
finished that one, an audiobook, because I had a car trip to do.
Okay. Well, audiobooks are great for long car trips.
Yeah.
I want to also, it was a question I meant to ask earlier, but we had such a great discussion on AI and quantum. 42 years and actually more than 42 years in your career, but I mean, 42 years at IBM. I know along a long career like that, there must have been like people you looked up to at certain points in your career, whether they were also colleagues, managers, bosses, or other leaders throughout your career. This is just a question where if there's someone you want to pay homage to that, hey, if this person was really influential in my life, whether they're here with us or no longer with us. But
Yeah.
is there a couple names you want to shine a light on?
Oh, there's a few. One of the early managers that I had, it was probably about the third manager I had during my career at IBM. I was still pretty new. And this guy, it was maybe the least technical manager I ever had. But what he had was a sense of people. He could read the room, he could read people, and he was a solid, older guy compared to me. I was still pretty fresh out of college, very experienced. I remember always I felt like he had my back. And we would leave a meeting and he would always find something to compliment me on and say, "You really did a good job in there. You handled that well," something like that. Because he did that, I wanted to do more to please him. He would build up in me the image of what he wanted me to become, and I didn't want to let him down. So I did my best to try to be that. And I wish I lost touch with him many years ago. I've tried to find him online. I can't find him anymore. But Bill Rice is his name, and he has no idea what impact he had in just creating that level of support. And there's such a lesson that I learned from that in working with other people as well, because I've had some really terrible managers over the years and some really great ones. And I've had some that were very dictatorial, very condescending, very, demanding. And it's like those are the people that will never get the best out of me. The guy that wants to get the best out of me, he believes in me, and then I never want to let him down because I that would just be crushing for me to think I'd let somebody like that down. So he's one. Another guy, Dick Baker, was a manager who was my manager at the time that gave me permission to write the book that I wrote, and
Okay.
that book became a career changer for me. And it benefited me personally. It benefited IBM. It benefited, as a result, it's put me out in places to do a lot of things and has benefited a lot of other people. He had the vision to see beyond the short term. Yeah, but what's that going to do for me this month or this quarter or this week? He could see, yeah, that's a good thing. You should go off and do that. So those are just two. I've had others, but
Oh,
those
wow.
two come to mind
I love
of
that.
mentors who made the space for and made it possible for me to be the best version of myself.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that and paying homage and shining the light. I know we're getting real. We're running over time, and I want to respect your time. There's a couple other questions I have. I'm gonna try to keep it super short, but I do want to give a moment for just like you shone a light on mentors and leaders and managers in your career. Is there any like nonprofit charity volunteer work, whether you donate your time, energy, money that you want to shine a light on that's near and dear to you? It doesn't have to be IT cyber related, but there are causes in the world because I know even though we do our jobs as cybersecurity folks, we still,
Hmm.
after hours, and we still dedicate our time, money, and resources and energy to helping better the world, right? So do you have
Yes.
anything that you would like to shine a light on? And of
Oh
course,
gosh,
find me their socials,
so
delete.
many, so many, and so I give little bits here and there, and I do it through something that I also have a big passion with, and that is running. So I run every day, 7 miles. I haven't missed
Wow.
a day in 11 years. So that's my
Wow.
level of OCD when it comes to this.
Okay.
Two rounds of COVID, injuries, weather, you name it. So one of the things I love about this is when I go do races invariably those races are fundraisers for charities as well. So that way I get to do something that's good for me physically, mentally, emotionally, and I get to help other people as well. One of the big causes that personally affects me is autism. I have a nephew who is very severely autistic. So I've done many races and fundraisers and things for that. And members in my family with diabetes, and it affects a lot of people. So I have a big emphasis and interest in those things. And then just mentoring and bringing along the next generation. I feel like so many people made it possible for me to get where I am that the best way that I can thank them is to try to help the next generation come along,
I
which is
love
why I teach at the university because it darn sure isn't for the money.
it.
So, but it's something I love and they appreciate and show me that every day. So that's what makes it worthwhile.
Well, John, we've definitely run over time, and I definitely respect and love the fact that you did us honor by being on this podcast. I'm losing my
My
words
pleasure.
and thoughts.
Absolutely.
I would love to have you back again.
Yeah.
Open invitation to come back because I feel we could talk about so many different things. But in closing, I do all like to give all my guests the last few minutes of the last word. Whether you're making a recommendation, giving advice,
Hmm.
predictions, whatever you want to talk about,
Yeah.
the final word is yours.
Okay. Sure, sure. We've referred to it a number of times, the YouTube videos. That's a real passion of mine. As a professor, I get to teach to 30 students at a time. As a YouTube content creator, I get to see the whole world. And if the projections hold next week, I will hit 12 million views on the videos. So to me, that's and no, I don't make any money on those videos. So every time somebody watches, I don't make any more money. But I feel better because I feel like that's a way of giving back. And I get contacts from people every single day, probably 10 LinkedIn connection requests a day from people saying, "Hey, I really appreciated the videos. This helped me prepare for an interview. This helped me choose my career path. This helped me understand some concepts that." So I'm like, yes. So everybody go out and watch those videos, and yeah, I know you'll include a link for it. And if you get anything out of it, then that's what makes the work worthwhile.
Well, again, thank you so much. So everybody, check the links out below. Please check the sites to include the charity links, the LinkedIn socials, and everything that John's going to give me. That just copy paste down below. But again, Doctor, I'm sorry, John. I meant
That's all
Jeff.
right. I've
Doctor
been called
Jeff
worse.
Crume has been an honor to have you, and thank you so much for being on the Top Cyber Pro podcast.
Thanks so much, Jim. I appreciate it.